3 days before her pension vested after 27 years of loyal service. She was fired without warning, but instead of staying silent, she exposed the truth, brought down the CEO, and turned a corporate empire upside down. This isn't just revenge, it's justice served cold. And what happened next? She didn't just win, she changed the system and inspired others to rise too. Up until 5 minutes ago, I was the senior compliance officer for one of the biggest manufacturing companies in St. Paul. My name is Eleanor Hart, and I am 62 years old. I've spent over 30 years making sure Grantwell complied with the law, recording inconsistencies, and refusing to back down when others sought simple answers to difficult issues. My pension was only 3 days away from fully vesting on Monday. I was on the verge of reaching the goal for which I had dedicated my adult life. Gavin moved the folder across his shiny desk. "We're letting you go due to budgetary constraints," he stated. He never looked into my eyes. Effective immediately. There was a slight tilt to the room. Financial limitations. Last quarter, Grantwell reported record profits. He went on, tapping the folder with his manicured finger. "This is your severance package. Get nothing if you don't sign by tomorrow. HR will accompany you to tidy your workstation." I should have been angry, startled, maybe even the want to beg. Rather, I felt an odd sense of tranquility. This was no accident. This was strategically scheduled to occur prior to my pension vesting. I picked up the folder and murmured softly, "Thank you for the opportunity." I refrained from opening it. Gavin seems taken aback by my poise, possibly anticipating protests or tears. However, I had devoted my professional life to analyzing patterns, and this one was obvious. I straightened my skirt, got up, and left with my dignity untarnished. As I packed my personal belongings, including the picture of my late husband, Thomas, the potted plant my daughter gave me when she left for college 15 years ago, and the award I had been given for 25 years of service, Tessa Liu from HR hovered uneasily. I took very little. A cardboard box couldn't contain the majority of what was important. Tessa Liu looked anxiously at the security man who was waiting to take me out and muttered, "I'm so sorry, Eleanor." "This is incorrect." I answered, "It is what it is." On the inside, though, I knew better. This wasn't only incorrect. It might have been against the law. I had been painstakingly recording financial discrepancies for the previous 4 years, and since Gavin joined the company, they had only gotten worse. I had reported questionable trends, written thorough letters up the chain, and even provided proof of earlier concerns. It had all been thrown away, buried, or sent back with the directive to focus on more pressing matters. The security officer held the door awkwardly as I made my final pass into the lobby. Clearly uneasy with his part in this deception, he responded, "Have a good weekend, Mrs. Reynolds." I gave a courteous nod. "I think I will." A cardboard box and a manila folder marked the end of 29 years of hard work, and the drive home felt unreal. As I drove through the well-known streets of St. Paul, Minnesota, the April rain drummed against my glass. I carried on toward the small house I had lived in alone ever since, passing the cathedral where Thomas and I had exchanged vows, and the school where our daughter had graduated. 12 years ago, I became a widow and reflected on everything I had given up for Grantwell. The recitals I missed in my early years when I had to put in extra hours to get promoted. When compliance issues occurred, the family trips were cut short. The endless evenings spent going over documents that no one else had the time or desire to look at. I had dedicated my best years to the company, trusting that my pension would finally bring security. I sat in silence for a while after pulling into my driveway so I could process the gravity of what had happened. Only 6 months had passed since Gavin Cross joined the organization. His reputation for streamlining operations, which usually meant slashing expenses at any cost, had preceded him. When I declined to certify compliance on his most recent cost-cutting initiative, a move that circumvented multiple regulatory requirements, I knew we would eventually clash, and we did. What surprised me was how swiftly and brutally he would try to get rid of me. I finally opened the severance package inside, made myself some tea, and sat at the kitchen table. The terms, which included giving up all future claims against the corporation in exchange for 3 months' compensation, were offensive. No pension, no continuance of health care, no recognition after almost 30 years of work. Just a check and a legal trap to keep me quiet. I have to sign the document by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Without consulting anyone, they were relying on my panic and terror to get me to sign as soon as possible. This wasn't how things were done. A deliberate attempt was made to deprive me of everything I had earned. I put the papers down and went to my home office, where I stored my private documents. My insurance policy was in a fireproof lockbox behind a row of family photo albums. I had been bringing copies of concerning financial records home, taking thorough notes during conversations, and archiving emails that revealed patterns of wrongdoing for 4 years. My professional intuition warned me something wasn't right, not because I intended to utilize them. I opened the box and looked over the contents. Emails telling employees to backdate quality control certifications, quarterly reports with modified numbers, and loan applications with fabricated data. Everything was there. Evidence spanning more than 1,000 pages demonstrates systematic deception that had increased under Gavin's leadership. Every problem I had brought up through the appropriate procedures had been disregarded or marginalized. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to a person I hadn't spoken to in a long time. Prior to departing to join the Securities and Exchange Commission, Richard Hale served as Grantwell's chief financial officer. Even when others thought my diligence was boring, he had always appreciated it. With my finger hovering over his name, I thought, it's time. I got up the following morning with a mission. Gregory and I had been talking for about 2 hours the night before, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. As though getting ready for combat, I put on the Navy suit I saved for crucial meetings. I was, in a sense, Gregory had paid close attention as I explained the circumstances and the records I had gathered. He gave a measured but determined reaction. Eleanor, this goes beyond a simple unfair termination. Your description raises the possibility that Grantwell has committed significant securities offenses. How is your pension timing? And that's only the beginning. He set up a meeting with his team for Monday morning and gave me an overview of the SEC's whistleblower rights. Avoid signing anything, he said, and keep those documents in a secure location. I made copies of everything, arranged the evidence in chronological order, and created a thorough index on Saturday morning. My mind was kept concentrated by the task, which kept the hurt and rage from taking over. I had 3 identical packets ready by noon, one for my own records, one for the SEC, and one that could be used as leverage if necessary. Throughout the day, my phone called multiple times. Tessa Liu from Human Resources, Langston Gavin, even the general attorney for the company. I listened to their progressively urgent messages as I let each call go to voicemail. Gavin's voice was tight as he said, "Eleanor, we need that paperwork signed today. If it helps, I can come by and pick it up." The lawyer was more straightforward. "Miss Reynolds, we must have your signed contract by the end of business hours. Your severance compensation could be completely jeopardized if you don't cooperate." Their desperate actions validated my suspicions. They were aware of their vulnerability and sought to ensure my silence before the weekend was over. I heard my doorbell ring at 4:30 p.m. Gavin was standing on my porch, his pricey suit seeming out of place in my modest neighborhood, as I could see through the peephole. I didn't respond. Through the door he called, "I know you're in there, Eleanor." This is absurd. We may all proceed after we sign the paperwork." When he finally put an envelope in my mailbox and went back to his fancy automobile, I watched in silence. Only then did I get it, an additional copy of the identical contract with a handwritten remark on it. "Last chance. By 9 sign. Monday." My daughter called for our weekly conversation that night. Sophie quickly noticed that my voice had an odd tone. "What's happening Mom? You sound different." I thought about playing it down, but I changed my mind. The truth was due to Sophie. I was fired yesterday, I stated plainly. What? However, your full pension is only a few days away. They are unable to do that. They did. I'm taking care of it, I answered. Do you require my return home? Tomorrow, I can board an aircraft from Denver. No, my love. Remain in place. This is something I can handle. We hung up, and as night fell, I sat in my living room contemplating the SEC meeting on Monday. I had attempted to resolve these problems internally for years since I trusted the system and the company's moral character. Even when I suspected severe misconduct, I had remained professional, discreet, and loyal. However, Grantwell had already made up its mind. I would now make mine. I would not sign their contract. I would not be quieted down. Above all, I wouldn't allow them to throw away 30 years of my life without any repercussions. It was impossible to wait for Monday. There was a clarity about Monday morning that I hadn't experienced in years. I put my paperwork in a safe briefcase, dressed appropriately, and drove downtown to the federal building where Gregory had set up our appointment. I felt a great deal of weight from what I was going to do, but I also felt that it was all right. SEC offices were modest but commanding, all glass walls and whispered dialogue. The sharp intelligence I remembered was still present in Gregory's familiar face, which was now lined with more years, when we met in the lobby. He shook my hand and murmured, "Eleanor," with warmth. "I wish we were meeting in a more favorable situation." "Gregory, it's nice to see you," I answered. "I appreciate you taking this seriously." Two other detectives were waiting in a conference room that he escorted me to. James Weston, a forensic accountant, and Angela Brennan, a senior enforcement lawyer. They both gave me polite, business-like greetings. "Mrs. Reynolds, I want to make sure you understand the procedure we're starting today, before we get started," Angela said. "An investigation is formally launched as soon as you provide us with this information. There is no way to go back." I gave a nod. I fully understand. I took them through my documents for the next 3 hours. When shipments didn't match invoices 4 years ago, I became aware of the improper financial reporting. The certifications for quality control that were retroactively issued after the products had already been distributed. The trend of revenue manipulation, which had been worse recently, especially after Gavin Cross joined the company. James studied the bank records with increasing alarm. He said, "These differences aren't minor. For the previous 2 years, the company has been consistently inflating its revenues by at least 18%. Securities fraud is what that is. And you brought these problems to your own attention," Angela inquired. "Several times," I affirmed, presenting them with copies of my emails and memos. Every time I was informed that the problems were being resolved, or that they claimed that I was misinterpreting the data. Gavin joined 6 months ago, and since then, my concerns have not been handled at all. They were diverted to his office instead, where they completely vanished. Gregory bent over. "And you think that these reports had a direct bearing on your termination?" "Without a doubt. It's clear from the timing, 3 days before my pension vested. Furthermore, I had lately pointed out a number of significant problems with Gavin's most recent cost-cutting plan. Before I could worsen, he needed me gone." Angela laid out the following steps as our meeting came to an end. "We'll start our investigation after we receive your formal statement," she stated. "Until we decide if enforcement action is necessary, it usually stays confidential." "How much time will it take?" I inquired. She said, "It varies, but we might move quickly on this one given the documentation you've provided and the clear pattern of misconduct." My phone rang before I had even made it home. Tessa Lou from HR was there. Her voice faltered. "There's something going on, Eleanor. An emergency meeting was just convened by the board. There are whispers that SEC investigators are getting in touch with our general counsel, and Gavin has been confined in his office all morning." So it had started quicker than I had expected. Grantwell's legal team must have been contacted right away by the SEC. "I'm not shocked," I stated coolly. Tessa Lou paused. Did you report anything, Eleanor? I answered, I just did what I should have done years ago. How is my pension paperwork progressing? That's the reason I'm phoning. Your firing is being examined by the executive committee. Everything has been placed on hold till further notice. My phone rang once more an hour later. It was board chairman Edmund Pierce this time, a man who, in our few previous encounters, had hardly recognized my existence. He said, his normally assured voice sounding strained, Miss Reynolds, we appear to be in a situation where your opinion is needed. Would you be open to discussing issues in the office tomorrow morning? I answered, I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Hargrove. My lawyer and possibly representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission should be involved in any discussions. I'm sure you understand. There was a profound quiet on the other end. Edmund Pierce cleared his throat at last. I understand. Then maybe we can set up something more official. I hung up with a profound fatigue at the need of it all, but no sense of satisfaction. Being a whistleblower was not something I had ever desired. All I had wanted was to retire with the security I had earned and to perform my duties with integrity. Grantwell, however, had made me do it. We would all now have to deal with the fallout. Throughout the evening, my phone kept ringing, executives trying to contain the damage, coworkers looking for information. I didn't respond to any of them. There was no more time for private discussions. Everything would now take place in the light. The storm was over by Wednesday morning. The SEC's probe into Grantwell Manufacturing made news in local business publications, which caused the stock to plummet. After applauding Gavin's efficiency measures only weeks prior, financial analysts suddenly questioned the veracity of the company's entire reporting system. Grantwell's legal department formally retracted my notice of termination and put me on administrative leave with full benefits while they conducted an internal assessment. It was an open endeavor to lessen the harm. It was also much too late. My lawyer, Clara Monroe, no connection, although we both found the coincidence funny, escorted me to a meeting at Grantwell's headquarters at 10 a.m. We went inside, and the security man who had led me out on Friday nodded politely. Employees were crowded in whispered talks that immediately ceased as we approached, creating a nervous mood within. Edmund Pierce, the company's outside counsel, and 3 other board members were waiting for us when we were led into the main boardroom. Notably missing was Gavin Cross. Edmund, who appeared to have aged years in a matter of days, started, "Thank you for coming, Miss Reynolds. We've started a thorough internal investigation into the issues you brought up." Before I could answer, Clara spoke. "Mr. Hargrove, I want to make something plain. After being fired, Ms. Reynolds didn't bring up these issues right away. Over the course of 4 years, she consistently documented and reported them, as required by her employment. It says volumes about the corporation that it chose to disregard the reports and subsequently fire her days before her pension vested." Edmund stirred uneasily. "Yes, well, that's a component of our investigation. I personally wish to reassure Miss Reynolds that her dismissal has been revoked. She has all of her benefits and is regarded by us as an employee in good standing, including my pension." I asked straight. "Obviously," he said hastily. "After you retire, we're actually willing to offer you a consulting position, which you can start right away if you'd like. We appreciate your knowledge and—" Clara cut in with ease. "My client isn't making any decisions today, and a thorough explanation of how her prior worries were repressed should come before any conversation about future plans." The board members tried to disassociate themselves from Gavin's behavior, as well as the financial problems I had documented during the 1-hour meeting. They presented themselves as ignorant, duped, or shielded by bureaucratic layers. However, I was aware the SEC did the same now. Misinformed individuals. They presented themselves in this way, showing surprise and dismay at the alleged wrongdoing. I watched their body language and generally kept quiet, letting Clara do the legal wrangling. Even though I had worked with them for years, they had never given me much attention. Not really. They were unable to turn away now. Their faces showed a mixture of fear and admiration. Edmund made one last plea as we were about to depart. Eleanor, we're hoping you'll think about discussing the corrective measures we're taking with the SEC investigators. Your assistance would be greatly appreciated. For the first time, I gave him a direct glance. Mr. Hargrove, I've been committed to this company's compliance for 29 years. I submitted 47 significant reports over that period, exposing significant inconsistencies. I specifically addressed the topics currently being investigated in 16 memos. Only 2 of the 9 meetings I asked for to address these issues with corporate leadership were approved. Both did not lead to action. When did I have your backing in that history? There was silence in the room. With a firm voice, I added, I'll cooperate fully with both the SEC and the internal investigation. However, as always, I will only discuss the facts. What you do next, not what you say in this room, will determine whether those facts help or hurt Grantwell. That was perfectly stated, Clara said in a whisper as we were leaving. I didn't let myself take a deep breath until we arrived at the parking lot. I was exhausted, but still lucid, as the adrenaline that had gotten me through the confrontation started to wear off. This was not a win. Not quite yet. It was only the start of responsibility. Now what? As we stood next to our automobiles, I asked Clara. She gave a small smile. While the inquiry is ongoing, they are now rushing to preserve everything they can. But don't misunderstand, Eleanor. They're afraid of you. I gave a headshake. They aren't afraid of me. The reality makes them frightened. Clara gave a contemplative nod. Yes, there is a distinction, and no matter how it turns out, you'll win because of that difference. While I was driving home, the corporation was rocked by Gavin Cross's abrupt suspension while an inquiry was conducted. Major investors and longtime partners became concerned after Grantwell's stock fell by about 30%. I was more than just the underappreciated compliance officer, Eleanor Hart. I was now referred to as a whistleblower in business journals. Grantwell was exposed by the woman. It was awkward to be the center of attention. I worked closely with the SEC investigators, who now had temporary offices in a different building adjacent to Grantwell's headquarters, but I never lost sight of the process. Numerous doors had been opened by the proof I had presented. However, the inquiry was uncovering even more concerning trends. One day, Gregory called to provide an update. He spoke solemnly. It's worse than we anticipated, Eleanor. The financial trickery predates Langston by at least 5 years. He didn't initiate it, but he did accelerate it. I had a suspicion, I answered. There were certain anomalies that I was unable to thoroughly record. Some executive-level reports were inaccessible to me. Gregory remarked, well, we can access them now. Additionally, they describe a pattern of deliberate fraud intended to artificially raise the company's worth. At least 3 members of the board must have known, despite the board's claims of ignorance. They approved important transactions. I should have been proven right by the news. Rather, it made me feel empty. Even I wasn't quite aware of the extent of the corruption at the company I had devoted my life to. Not only were the individuals I confided in with my worries careless, they were actively involved in the identical scam that I had attempted to uncover. Sophie gave me a call that afternoon. Anger was thick in her voice. Have you seen the news, Mom? No, I replied. I have been evading the publicity, concentrating on the formalities. You might want to take a look. They are attempting to undermine you. What do they say? Langston, the GRW executive, was interviewed. He says you had problems with your performance, that being passed over for a promotion made you angry. He's giving the impression that you're taking revenge because of personal grievances. I wasn't shocked. Attacking the whistleblower's credibility instead of addressing the accusations was a cliched defensive tactic. Sophie, it doesn't matter, I responded coolly. The evidence speaks for itself, I told Sophie. For 29 years, my performance reports have been excellent. That history cannot be changed at this time. But that was precisely what Gavin was attempting to do. By that evening, his story had been picked up by a number of news outlets who questioned my intentions and implied that I had falsified documents to frame him. An act of desperation by a desperate man. It still hurt, though, to have my honesty so openly questioned. Clara called right away. She said, "Don't answer any of it. Tomorrow, the SEC will release a statement outlining your status as a whistleblower and the reliability of your evidence. Let this be handled through the proper means." I informed her that I had no intention of answering, but I'm going to take a different approach. I requested to meet with Tracy Ferguson, the branch manager, when I drove to my neighborhood bank the following morning. She managed the majority of Grantwell's local banking operations, so I had known her for years. She gave me a warm greeting, "Eleanor. I've been keeping up with the news. How are you doing?" "Tracy, I'm all right. However, I must have access to my safe deposit box." I unlocked the box inside the private room and took out a sealed mail that I had left there 3 years prior. Copies of emails that Gavin's predecessor sent to 2 board members on how to manage financial appearances during a crucial acquisition phase were included. While archiving old emails, I had unintentionally come across them. I felt compelled to put them aside and keep them apart from the other documents. My original SEC report did not include them. They didn't appear to be directly related to Gavin's wrongdoing at the time. However, now that he was trying to undermine me, they gave important background information, demonstrating that the harmful practices existed before him and that I had no personal grudges. Just the facts. I immediately gave Gregory a call. I said to him, "I have something you must see. It completely alters the story." I was not satisfied as I drove to meet him. Just assurance that now, no matter who had attempted to conceal it, the whole truth would come to light. 10 days after I was fired, and 7 days after the SEC inquiry was made public, an emergency board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. I was not invited. However, I was aware of what was going on without having to be present. The investigation had been expedited significantly by the new material I had supplied, showing not only Gavin, but also several other board members in a pattern of financial fraud that lasted for years. I was just outside the meeting room when Gregory called. "There is anarchy there," he said. "The initial results from the SEC enforcement team were just presented. 3 members of the board have immediately resigned. No one is buying Gavin's assertion that he was merely adhering to established practices." Grantwell announced a leadership reorganization and complete collaboration with regulatory bodies in a press statement by midday. The well-crafted statement affirmed Gavin Cross's termination for cause and the resignation of 4 board members, including Edmund Pierce. That afternoon, the already damaged company's stock fell another 12%. My phone rang. Tessa Liu from HR was back. "The acting CEO would like to speak with you, if at all feasible, tomorrow." Margot Wells, the former chief operating officer, served as the acting CEO. She had always been courteous, if not warm, toward me as a professional. I consented to the meeting, provided it was held at my lawyer's office. Margot appeared worn out, yet determined, when she came the following day. She started by saying, "Eleanor, I won't waste time with pleasantries. The business is having a crisis. Because you were the only one who constantly acted morally, you are at the center of it, not because you did anything bad." A folder that looked disturbingly similar to the one Gavin had set in front of me 11 days prior was slid across the table by her. "This confirms your full pension vesting, reinstates your employment retroactively, and formally rescinds your termination," she said. "It also includes an additional compensation package that acknowledges the challenges you have faced." I opened the folder. The compensation package included complete life insurance, a public apology from the board, and an amount equivalent to 5 years' worth of my salary. Margot added, "We're also creating a new corporate ethics division. After you retire, we would like you to serve as a consultant and assist in its design. Your expertise is priceless." Without responding to the offer, I closed the folder. Gavin Cross 2. The members of the board, Margot's face became stern. Criminal accusations are anticipated. The business won't stand up for them. It appeared that justice had reached Grantwell Manufacturing at last. I sat in a federal courtroom 6 months later. Two former board members and Gavin Cross pleaded guilty to charges of securities fraud. In his dark suit, the man who had so nonchalantly put an end to my career now appeared shrunken, his haughtiness replaced by defeat. As he turned to go, our eyes briefly locked. And there I noticed recognition, not of me in particular, but of who I had become into. I was a personification of the results of his deeds. The Grantwell incident has turned into a case study on the importance of internal compliance and corporate governance shortcomings. In order to engage with regulatory bodies to improve whistleblower procedures, I had turned down the consulting position with the restructured company. My story sparked a chain reaction across industries as other compliance officers came out with their own evidence of corporate malfeasance. I received a sizable whistleblower payout from the SEC, which was equivalent to 15% of the fines imposed on Grantwell. The payment, along with my pension, gave me greater financial stability than I could have ever dreamed. I used it to create a scholarship fund that I named after Thomas for women who want to work in business ethics and compliance. Sophie had taken my 2 grandkids with her. Wahan she moved to St. Paul to be nearer to me. At my new lakefront house, we spent weekends together, creating memories I had missed from working so many long hours. Sophie asked me a question that surprised me one evening when we were sitting there watching the sunset over the ocean. "Mom, seeing how things turned out, do you regret remaining at Grantwell for all those years?" I gave this great thought. "No," I eventually said. "I don't regret my job there, but I regret that it was necessary to expose them." Being truthful when it's convenient isn't the only aspect of integrity. It's about always sticking to your values, even if it means paying a price. Sophie gave a contemplative nod. You taught me that, by example, not by words. I came to see that was possibly the most significant result of all. Not the confirmation, not the stability of finances, but knowing that my decisions had taught my daughter what it meant to uphold your morals, no matter the cost. Regarding Grantwell Manufacturing, the business persisted, albeit in a much smaller form. Transparent reporting procedures and strict compliance measures were put into place by the new administration. Maybe as a reminder, maybe as an apology, they continued to send me their annual reports. With a quiet professional satisfaction, I attentively studied them and noted the better methods. My story may seem like a revenge tale to some. However, I've never thought of it that way. I just did what I always did. Recorded the facts, told the truth, and maintained my conclusions. What's different this time? At last, others had to pay attention. And ultimately, it was about regaining my voice, my value, and my peace, not about getting even. Sometimes enjoying a good life is the finest form of retaliation, leaving with strength rather than resentment. Breathe if you have been deceived. Establish limits. Get better. Expand. To win gracefully, you don't need to battle hard. I would be delighted to hear from you now. Have you ever experienced betrayal that altered who you are? Then what did you do? Maybe someone needs to hear your experience, so share it in the comments section. Additionally, keep in mind that your accomplishments speak louder than your failures.